Welcome to the World of Horror Special Edition Quinnisode, episode 101. I'm Christina.
And I'm Quinn.
This is the podcast where Quinn and I have a conversation about a work of classic horror in our Midwest accents. For this Quinnisode, we are looking at Alfred Hitchcock's 1948, perhaps ill-conceived experimental film, Rope. Disclaimers for adult language and heavy spoilers. Let's move on to our first segment, Christina and Quinn chat. Hi, Quinn. How's it going?
It's going okay. How are you?
I'm good. What's new?
What is new? I'm officially going back into Baby Watch. It's March 25th. My sister-in-law is due on the 12th of April, but the baby may come early, and I'm going back into Baby Watch mode where I'm sort of on call to drive down to Charleston when she goes into labor. And if you feel like you're listening to an episode you've listened to before, I probably said the exact same thing before.
Refresh our cue balls on the birth dates of your other nieces.
Okay. Kennedy was born on January 2nd, 2021. Cora was born on June 2nd, 2022. The new baby is due on April 12th, 2023. They do not know what they're having. And, some would call my brother and sister-in-law prolific. Some would call them adventurous, especially in the midst of a pandemic. Some would call them nuts.
Yeah, but they've made some pretty good ones so far. I mean, they've got a pretty good track record.
Yeah, they've made the two best ones ever. So I am excited for this third one. And I did just get to see them a couple of weeks ago and got to know Cora more because she is just, still very young, but she is a weirdo. And I just didn't really have any idea how weird she was. I think, but Cora's a year and a half, and she was one of those, she didn't really you couldn't see her personality coming out very much because Kennedy is kind of like a force of nature. And she is very, very full of quirkiness and fun. And so I think it just took a little bit longer for Cora's, stuff to shine through. But man, she's weird. And she's maybe part feral cat. And she's just the best. And she's so smart and just so cute. And she already has a big vocabulary. She's just doing things, I think, really fast. And I don't know. I love her a lot.
That's so great.
Yeah. How about you? What's new with you?
Well, I'm just getting over a cold again, and I wish I knew what it is that just keeps knocking me back every couple weeks. It's never on the scale of a Quinn cold, which those are pretty epic.
Well, they are lengthy.
Yeah, it just sort of knocks me out for a day or three, and then I'm fine. But when it knocks me out, I can't think, and I'm exhausted. And sometimes there are other things that go along with that too, like headaches or coughing or things like that. But it's just more annoying than anything else, and it just keeps happening. So just over another one of those. My students are probably like, what the F? But I'm also just looking forward to the end of this year. I got up and did some artwork this morning, and I thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice if I could do this more and I didn't have to work so much. And there is this really nice feature of our job, which is once we're done turning in grades for the spring, we have about 3 weeks where we don't have to do anything before the summer term starts. And that is what I'm looking forward to at this point.
Yeah, I am too. I have a very strange semester that does not feel normal in any way, but I'm for sure still looking forward to that little break of nothing being due. And yeah.
Do you know what you're doing for the fall?
Yeah. Oh, my classes?
Yeah.
Yep, I do. I have all humanities.
Oh, nice. No English.
Yeah, Terry is trying to move me fully over.
Ooh, nice.
I know. I can't even. I hope it works. That's all I can say. That would be great.
Me too.
Yeah, because English it's a job. It's all a job, but you add in layers of, those big essays from a bunch of people, and it gets way worse quick.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to get I already committed to having no textbook for the fall. And about half of my stuff last fall was textbook free. So now I have to move the whole thing over to no textbook. But I also want to have no tests and maybe no quizzes, or the quizzes are just practice quizzes or something, because they cheat anyway. It's, they're online quizzes, and you can find the answers online. And so at this point, it's just kind of pointless, I think, to have quizzes and tests online. But yeah, I'm like you. I don't want to grade a bunch of essays either. So I have to find assignments that can't be plagiarized, but do demonstrate mastery of the material. And at some point, right before I retire, probably, this course is going to be in really great shape. But anyway, I'll settle for better than last year. For next year.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. The only thing I feel really confident in film classes and in terms of testing what they've learned is application questions. And those are really difficult to kind of come up with.
Yeah.
So, and I only do them for my final, and it's a job. And it's really not easy to grade either. That's not easy to grade because they are application, and because I have come up with them and they are obscure and weird, I do get all different answers, and some of the answers kind of work. And I think, whoa, what a weird brain that answered it this way. But yeah, I can see it that way. So that takes longer too.
Anyway, maybe we should get into it, Quinn.
Yeah.
Do you want to run through the stats?
Yes, absolutely. So Rope was directed by Alfred Hitchcock, screenplay by Arthur Lawrence, story by Hume Cronin, based on Rope, a 1929 play by Patrick Hamilton. The film stars James Stewart, John Dall, Farley Granger, Joan Chandler, Sir Cedric Hardwicke, Constance Collier, Douglas Dick, Edith Evanson. Cinematography by Joseph Valentine and William Scall, edited by William Ziegler. And it was released in the United States in 1948. And again, it's from a 1929 play. That was I don't know that the play was ever in the United States, but it was.
Oh,
I read that. I should have double checked it, but I did read some interesting differences from, sort of subtext in the film versus the play when it was done in England. So, all right, I watched it on internetarchive.org. You watched it on Prime.
I did.
And it's a short 80-minute film. So this would be a Mac film. Mac would like the length of this one. And it does feel short. And I guess it doesn't really unfold in real time, but in almost real time, added like maybe 25 minutes or so. So, yeah. What's your experience with this one?
This is the first time I've seen this film. So back in the day, I was a pretty big fan of Roger Ebert's show, And I believe that maybe there was a reissue or something like that. And they did a special show on Rope and how it was kind of I don't think Roger Ebert was like the biggest fan, but he did point out that there was an attempt to make it seem as if it was all done in one take. And so the cameras, I guess at the time, could only film up to maybe 10 minutes. And so they kept having to the camera would like go into somebody's back, or something, so that, and then the next cut would pick up from there. So there were kind of some goofy things that he did to make it seem like it was all done in one take. And I just remember that. And I didn't remember anything else about what they had said about it. And I hadn't seen it till now. And I had a blast. Oh my gosh. You said that it was, well, the first time I watched it, I just was kind of distracted. I wasn't watching that carefully. And you said, this is so grim, and it's so like dark. And it did seem like that. But then when I watched it more closely, I had a blast. And I was texting you and saying, this movie is hilarious. I love it. And you called me a monster, but that's okay.
So also, I recommended this one as being such a fun Hitchcock. But then when I revisited it now, I just was like, and it stayed with me for days and days. And then I rewatched it and it, the effect kind of lessened a little bit. But I mean, it is both fun and so dark. But this time struck me as being really dark, more dark than I ever remembered it, even though you could ask me what the plot was and I could tell you. And that's the dark part. And I still, it didn't, I don't know. But yeah, I saw it differently this time. But I do still think it's fun for sure. And I do love long takes. So I know that, what he didn't come off particularly flawless, but I think it was such a job for 1948. And what long takes do is, they kind of like slow things down and they build suspense in their own way. So if you're not watching quick edits, cutting here and there, you're staying with the action and you're staying so tightly within it that you're feeling it more. And I do feel like this feels much more suspenseful than other films that maybe do something similar but don't utilize those long takes. I mean, these are really long takes. And it's like a gimmick in this sense, of course. Obviously, Hitchcock uses long takes in all of his films here or there. But doesn't rely solely on it like this. But I love them because I just think it puts you so much more in the action. And it just I always take note of my breath when I'm watching films that are utilizing long takes, because sometimes I feel like I'm not breathing because I feel so much suspense. But they do slow things down. I like them when they're sporadically used. Maybe not, entire film long takes, but because they slow it down. Maybe you can breathe more when they're sporadically used, but when it's, the entire film, it's like, I haven't taken a breath in 80 minutes, but I mean, obviously I had, but okay.
I think there are a couple of really good, well, maybe we should talk about what the movie's about for those people who haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Basically, the premise is two school friends decide to kill another friend of theirs from school on a lark. And then, well, it's not really on a lark. They feel like they're superior to this friend, and as such, they should be able to do whatever they want, including murder this guy. And so they do. And then, as a capper to that audacious act, they have a dinner party where his body is present in the room. And they invite his parents, his girlfriend, and another classmate and their former professor, played by Jimmy Stewart. So that's the premise of the film. And I feel like there are a couple of really long takes that are very effective. One is, so they place him in this chest, and then they serve all of the food for the party on top of this chest. And at the end of the party, the what is she, housekeeper?
Yeah.
Yeah, she clears off the chest, but she's taking things from on top of it back into the kitchen, and then she's just going back and forth, and the camera is static on her movement. So as she's clearing more and more of the stuff away, the suspense is building because you don't want her to open the chest and obviously discover the body.
Yeah, and I think the whole movie to me feels like a lot of suspense. And I do think that the long takes add to that, but also because, they do this seemingly very, with very little time in between killing this guy and having this party. There seems to be not much time. So then when you're watching it, I mean, you come to know these two characters, Brandon and Philip, the two boys, come to know them pretty well. And I would argue that you never really come to have much empathy or any empathy for them, but you still are concerned because they're trying to pull off this crazy, disgusting, weird feat. So the whole thing is, I mean, the plot is rife for something like this, to make something like this where you are even more filled with dread than you would have been and with just maybe some long takes and shorter cuts and edits and things.
Yeah, and the other time that I feel like the suspense is really ramped up is when their professor starts to suspect that they have in fact killed their friend. And he's putting the pieces together and trying to question them without directly questioning them about it. And the scene with him and Philip at the piano, I feel, is really effective in terms of, I don't know, the acting on the actors' parts and just the building of suspense there, because the professor is very intelligent and, he's correct in his assumptions, but it's also so horrible to think that they would have done that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's nearing the end. And so, yeah, he's starting to suspect it, but you can tell he doesn't believe it. He even says something like, I don't actually know how to come out and ask what I want to know. So he sort of dances around it. But while he's sort of dancing around it, Philip is answering his question. He sets like the metronome down on the piano and he just like lets it go. And it slowly starts to speed up. And his piano playing, Philip's playing the piano, and it's speeding up, and it's the same tune that he's been playing throughout the whole film, and it's just sped up, and it feels warped, and it feels like even more, just even more dread and fear when you're watching that because of the tension that's being built, the atmosphere, and then the sound, and the diegetic sound with the metronome. I love the metronome. Like, I love that effect in that scene. I love that scene so much.
Yeah, it's really awesome. I'm not sure if this is one of the things that bothered you, but it kind of bothered me that the dead boy's father is present at the party. And in fact, the party is sort of being thrown in his honor in a way. There's this bit about how the Brandon and Philip want to gift this man with some first edition books. And so that's why they've invited him. It's all just for their amusement. And as the party goes on, people are getting more and more concerned that this boy has not shown up for the party and it's not like him and where is he and all this other stuff. And of course, being 1948, this is way before cell phones and there's no way to track this guy in any way. I felt so bad for this father, There's a speech that you and I had a little bit of a disagreement about in terms of Jimmy Stewart's character's, I don't know, character. So I feel like he's sort of joking with some of the other guests about his thought that if murder was legalized, it would solve a lot of problems. And so actually I have some of that dialogue.
Okay.
He says, after all, murder is, or should be, an art. Not even one of the seven lively, perhaps, but an art nevertheless. And as such, the privilege of committing it should be reserved for those few who are really superior individuals. And Brandon is all about this. He loves this kind of talk, and this is really what's got him going. And he says something like, he doesn't think that, it should be open season for murder all year round. No, personally, I would prefer to have a cut a throat week or a strangulation day. And that is ironic because the murder victim in question has actually been strangled by Philip and Brandon in the opening scene of the film. Mr. Kentley, the father of the victim, is not enjoying this at all. He feels really uncomfortable and he doesn't like this kind of talk. And he's like, I don't know if you're joking or you're not joking, but in either case, I don't like it. Rupert says, I'm not joking. I actually really believe this. I think he's joking when he says that, but you don't. Is that right?
I don't know. I think he's so ingrained in this sort of he's so on board with these ideas, and for a reason perhaps, but because we didn't experience his class or whatever Philip and Brandon were in, we don't have a whole lot of, reference for this, but neither does Mr. Kentley. And I don't know. I think the insistence on it without the understanding of where it comes from, to me, I don't like that. And I do believe in the end he feels guilt.
Yeah.
For having planted seeds in these boys' heads, and maybe he should. He probably shouldn't. But, I do feel like him feeling the guilt, to me, kind of indicates that he is a little guilty.
I think he was reckless. I think he enjoys his own intellectual superiority or his own intellectual deftness, which we see when he's making fun of the women and them talking about some play they can't remember the title of, or, makeup or whatever they're talking about. So we see him enjoying himself and his own sense of, but he does sort of wink at the girlfriend. I can't remember her name, Joan.
Yeah.
Because he knows that she is in on the joke, even if the other lady is not.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it goes really beyond that. And I think maybe he assumed that Brandon and Philip could understand a sense of irony,
right,
where they couldn't,
Right. Yeah, and it's kind of, I guess, even just hearing you say that makes me, I don't know, it makes me kind of happy in a way, just because I think that their assumed superiority through it all is so nauseating, to watch it. And then yeah, in the end, it's they never even really understood the subtext of what Rupert was saying or teaching in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do love that scene though with Mrs. Atwater and Janet. And Mrs. Atwater keeps having trouble coming up with titles of things, and she's just amazing. She's David's aunt, so Mr. Kentley's sister. Mrs. Kentley is sick at home, so he brings his sister instead, who's visiting New York. And it just feels like she's just waiting to be on display at different things. I mean, and she should be, because she really is that great. She's an amazing presence at this party, for sure. But you can tell she'd probably be an amazing presence anywhere. She's trying to remember some things that she likes that she's recently seen while she's talking to Janet. And she cannot remember the name. And so she's like, the something on something. And Janet will be like, yes, I know, it was something like that. It was the something something. And then they directly reference how they both love Cary Grant. And they talk about his latest picture with Ingrid Bergman. And Mrs. Atwater says, I cannot remember the name of it, but it was just something. It wasn't something, something, something. It was just something. And Janet says, yes, I believe you're right. It was just something. And it's also, I also like that just because of the Hitchcock world of like, well, of course it's a connection to Notorious, his previous film, but also sort of the world in which if you like Hitchcock movies, like you've had an argument in your head in every Hitchcock movie, who should be the lead? Is it Jimmy Stewart or Cary Grant? Like you will always argue that in your head, you know? And in this case, like actually Cary Grant was offered the part, or he wanted Cary Grant to play the part, and he was like, he didn't want to because there were these, you know, this sort of subtext going on, which like we're not there yet. We haven't talked about this yet, but he didn't want to be associated with the relationship between Brandon and Philip and maybe Rupert. So, which is kind of ironic, but anyway, I love that. I love that scene with Mrs. Atwater and Janet.
Yeah, and that's the way people talk. But maybe, you know, Jimmy Stewart's character doesn't want to, you know, associate with that kind of, you know, plebeian, pedestrian kind of conversation because he's such, you know, an intellectual snob. I mean, we can just come out and say it. I mean, Philip and Brandon are a homosexual couple, and a lot of the Letterboxd reviews were like, this is the gayest movie ever. This movie's so gay, gay, gay. Although somebody said this was queer baiting. I don't think it's queer baiting because they actually are gay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess in the original play, the part of Rupert, the professor, he played a much younger man who was also gay and may have had a relationship with one or both of the boys.
Okay.
And so that's there. In the movie, it's not suggested that the professor had a relationship with anybody. But it's pretty heavily
at one point, because it's like assumed that Mrs. Wilson was his, you know, housekeeper years ago. You know, it's kind of assumed that because she says at one time, you know, I had champagne. I have champagne on. Rupert had champagne on special occasions, and once I even had champagne with him on my birthday.
Okay.
And she mentions how she needed to get the pate that Rupert likes. And then, you know, when he comes and stuff, she's like, I have that pate you like. And he's like, I don't like that anymore. And she's like, oh my gosh, blah, 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 you know, and kind of like gets all up, you know, hot about it. And he's like, I do like it. But like, it just also, it's another piece of evidence of how contrarian he is, like his personality too. Like even just doing that, like it's not really funny. And you just burst this woman's bubble who's like obviously loves him so much. And then at one point he says, oh, Mrs. Wilson, I'm probably going to marry her. And to think of a marriage between him and her is almost like it's unbelievable. And I feel like that kind of sort of suggests it too.
Okay, yeah. Huh.
That he can't have a relationship at the time that would be open. And, you know, so he'll just marry Mrs. Wilson.
Huh, interesting. And I guess I missed all of that, but that fills in a lot. Like the when they are talking, just the two of them, they seem to have an intimacy that you could have with a virtual stranger. It's not impossible, but it makes a whole lot more sense, you know, when she's sort of in a way gossiping about the boys and having the dinner, you know, in this room on this chest. It's so absurd and everything like that. And that sort of helps him to put together the pieces that, you know, it was very intentional on their part, but for very gruesome reasons.
Yeah, I actually still don't fully understand it. I mean, I really don't. Other than the idea of like pulling off this insanely obvious thing, putting it in everyone's face and getting away with it. I mean,
Yeah.
I understand that, but
No, I think that's it.
yeah,
But also, I mean, the idea that I don't know, you're eating food in such close proximity to a corpse. I mean, that's
crash
just
course.
perverse and like it's grotesque, the
Yeah,
idea.
yeah,
Um, I remember when I was in middle school, I was first introduced to the idea of El Dia de los Muertos, which is when people go to the cemetery and they have a picnic with, on top of the graves of their dead loved ones. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, I don't know. It just sounds so horrible to me. It just sounds so like disgusting. Now I actually think it's kind of beautiful, but I just remember at the time hearing that just because of my own cultural bias and stuff, just thinking, oh my God,
yeah.
that's just like so insanely gross.
Did you grow up having like open casket funerals and
Yeah.
visitations and stuff? Okay, all right. I don't
Only a
know.
few. I've only seen a few people in caskets though. I mean, I have a pretty small family.
Yeah, that actually is not even a part that got me in this movie. And I'm wondering if it's because I experienced a lot of like Catholic open casket, visiting the body for 3 days at a funeral home and then having the funeral. And oh my, yeah, I mean, just a lot of like body.
Oh, I don't think I could.
Yeah.
Oh wow. I like my stomach just dropped for a second. Like I have a thing with bodies. Do you know what I mean? And I think we've talked about this before, but I haven't been around that many dead bodies, mostly animal deaths in my life, but I don't even know if I'm going to keep this in the podcast, but when my cat Lillian died, and I was holding her corpse and I saw the light go out of her eyes and the tongue start to loll out of her mouth. And the nurse tech said, "Oh, you can stay in here with her for as long as you'd like." And I just thrust the corpse back in her arms. I said, "Oh no, like we're done here." Like, to me, that's my belief. And I know people have different relationships with dead bodies, and I don't fault them for that. But to me, that wasn't my cat anymore.
Yeah.
You know? And then with humans, I've spent very, very short amount of time with like my my grandma Ruth and my mom. And in both cases I was like, well, they're gone. Like the person is gone.
Yeah.
But not to go on about it, but I just feel like, and then I just start to think of what's happening like on a cellular level, like with the organism, and then I just can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like to think about that either. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know.
But my sister is Jewish, and she washes bodies and like does shiva and all this stuff, and it's spiritual and beautiful,
Yeah.
and I don't have that in my world, so
I don't think I've actually ever thought about it. I just, it was so a part of my formative years that that's just what happens. And I don't, I also watched a lot of people die. And then experienced and I don't know that it's typical that it's like a 3-day funeral home visitation process anymore. I think it's shorter than that, or usually tends to be, from what I can understand now. But I mean, it really was like for 3 days, like the first day would be like the afternoon. The second day would be like from 10 to 7 at night, and then the third day would maybe be like the afternoon again. And then the fourth day would be the funeral. It was just such a thing. So but I mean, honestly, a body like that has gone through a process of being, intensely preserved, and nobody looks like they did. And, everyone looks like, even if they look great, they look off. Certainly not like they did the last time you saw them. And, I don't like that.
Well, I mean, I think your upbringing was probably healthier than mine, just in terms of just exposure, just like pure exposure to bodies. I mean, it's a part of life, and it's a big part of, people's religious traditions and processing what has happened,
Yeah.
But for me, there's been like a huge like line, between my experience of the living being and the dead being.
Yeah. And interestingly enough too, I feel like when I moved south, there's a cultural difference with death as well. That sort of rises above the religious differences or anything like the religious cultures. But I don't know. I do think that people in the South are more interested in sort of celebrating the person in the life than people in the North are. Even like, maybe that's really a generalization, but I know like technically or typically when you think of, I don't know, I guess like let's say Irish people celebrating the death, or like, I don't know, I don't know what word I'm looking for, but there is, you typically think of them as like partying, but that is a thing that is for sure there, but it comes after like a very long process of staring at a body, grieving, guilting, feeling so much guilt for what you didn't say or what you did say, then going and getting drinks because you gotta like dull the guilt somehow. But then in the South, like I do think that the sort of funerals or whatever celebrations of life that I've experienced are more about like, let's get together, let's have a good time, and let's share a story. And I don't know, or maybe that's just the experiences I've had down here. Because
I feel, I mean, I feel like maybe, and I don't know if this is a cultural difference, but I feel like most of the gatherings I've attended have been memorials, where there is no body, like the body's been cremated or whatever's the case, but really it's a gathering of the surviving loved ones to get together and tell stories and share memories and that kind of thing. And I don't know if that's just a new thing.
Yeah.
Because I don't come from a religious background and I haven't had a lot of experience, but I've been to more memorials than funerals.
Yeah. And I know, I mean, when Cole died, I had anxiety specifically about seeing him. And that was never even going to be factored into anyone's equation. Like there was no, he didn't want that. Nobody pushed that, nobody, whatever. So the memorial for him actually, like, well, I didn't really want to go. I knew I would go, but it was really good for me. And I think for you too, like, cause it was great to hear everyone's story, but that is not my typical thing. And I was very much awed by it. I remember even telling my parents about it, and they would, I remember them saying, that's interesting, because like that's not their experience at all. And, even when Josiah's mom and then his dad died, the same thing. It was like there was a party somewhere where everyone shared memories. And I remember my parents saying the exact same thing then, like, that's interesting. But I mean, that's a better use, I think, maybe.
I think so too. I mean, like when my grandfather died, he was a veteran of World War II and the Korean War, and member of his VA, and you know, in Joplin, Missouri, he was kind of a big deal, I guess. And vets showed up in uniform to his memorial service, and I was really moved by that. You know, I don't know, that just got me. But yeah, it was just my mom kind of kicking off the storytelling at that memorial service, and a lot of funny stories were told about a guy I was kind of afraid of. You know, he was anyway, so it was kind of cool because I got to know him at his memorial in a way that I had never really known him, and
Yeah,
that was kind of cool.
that's kind of
Um,
amazing. That's really cool.
yeah. Anyway,
We got off on a tangent there,
a
but
little tangent, but I think it was good. We can sort of jump to another place in the movie if you want.
I don't know if you have a place in mind that you want to jump to, but something that just came to me, I think I had notes about it maybe. One thing that I noted, the opening shot of the film, where I mean it's the opening shot is of their street, right? And then everything takes place within their apartment. It's a couple of rooms that you see in and out of, like you can see the kitchen in the hallway, but you're staying mainly in the living room. That's where the camera mainly stays. But the opening shot is of the street, and then the camera, it's like right outside of what would be like their little patio or deck, kind of like the camera moves from the street, giving you a view of the street into the window. And then all of the other action throughout the whole film takes place on the other side with the window, obviously you can see the window always in the forefront. But I love I swear I will watch any movie where the opening is the point of view of the camera kind of like taking you inside a place in a window.
Yeah,
Sorry, I can hear the dogs. And I think it's not, I mean, I think it's kind of a Hitchcock thing. And I'm not saying that he's the only one that ever did it, for sure, not saying that. But he does that in quite a few movies. Like the opening scene of Psycho, you have like the place and the year, and then you're going into a window and you're seeing something that you shouldn't be seeing, this implied affair. And then with this one, you're going into a window and you're seeing something that you shouldn't see, which is this murder. And then it takes you, the next 80 minutes to realize this was a completely pointless murder. And oh my gosh, who are these people? And this is so deeply painful, and for all these reasons, but you're seeing something that you're not supposed to. So like, again, the emphasis on voyeurism, which is like, anytime you're watching a movie, you're like supposed to be seeing this slice of life that you wouldn't normally get to see. And I just love the idea of coming in through a window like that. I'm pretty sure he does that in Rear Window, at least. I mean, one of the early shots is coming in through his window and seeing his casted leg in the wheelchair, like. So I'm wondering how many other movies are like this, Hitchcock movies, because those are just off the top of my head, like the idea of that establishing shot being something that is, is not allowed. Like we shouldn't be seeing. It's not for us, but we are
yeah,
seeing it.
yeah. I think it's really cool too, because we're going from just like this static shot looking down at this busy city street and all these, just random strangers going about their lives, into this very, whew, like inappropriately intimate moment, like you said, where we should never be. And then we're just stuck there with these people for the
Yeah.
rest of the movie. And it's really uncomfortable. I mean, I was laughing, at some of the dialogue, because the implications are just too horrible to live with. The fact that, they just killed this kid to prove that they could get away with it.
Yeah. I
I
think,
mean, what a horrible, murder's bad anyway, but I mean, this is, particularly horrible
yeah, I
and
think,
offensive and just so sad. And then just thinking about the age of this person and
yeah. And I think I spent the first time watching it this time around, I think I spent a lot of the movie just kind of thinking like, okay, but what did he do? Like, what did he really do to them? What did he do to them? And then, you get most of the way through and you realize that there isn't another reason. You know, there isn't anything. There isn't any motive. It's just they did it because they could, or they wanted to show that they could. They're superior to him. But yeah, I like that. I like that establishing shot of like, not an establishing shot, but like the establishment of, okay, here, I'm dropping you here in these weirdos' apartment. You're gonna stay there and you're gonna watch what happens. But I'm done, because
yeah,
that's the only set that we have, and that's
yeah.
kind of claustrophobic too.
And we get some interesting characters. I mean, especially Mrs. Atwater. But I was really drawn to Mr. Kentley. I don't know. I just really felt like this poor guy has no idea that his kid has been murdered. And, I don't know. I just was really thinking about him and and I think the actor did a great job because the whole time I was like, he's probably, because he keeps saying, oh, I'm sure he's fine. I'm sure it's nothing. I'm sure he'll be along any moment. But, he's probably thinking, why isn't he here? What's going on? What's wrong? Maybe he was in a car crash. Maybe like his off camera, the mother, verbalizes all those worries, but any parent would have them. And I think the actor really does a great job of putting on a brave face when he's probably going crazy inside his own mind.
Yeah, and he is in a very small, intimate setting with at least three people who, or I mean, like, let's say at least two people who are going on at least about, the logistics of murder, being Rupert and Brandon. Philip really doesn't talk about it. He's very on edge the whole time. And he's very fearful that someone will find out, and he never intended for Rupert to be invited. Brandon did that, and obviously that adds a layer of suspense because he's the only one that would have the gall to convict them of this during this party, and he does. But yeah, he's in a very uncomfortable situation, with his sister. He's just visiting and probably feels like, what the hell? Like, come on, David, like, get here because, like, why am I here? Why did I bring my sister here to listen to them talk about murder and joke about murder and talk about the logistics of murder? Which some of that discussion kind of reminded me of Shadow of a Doubt, where
Yeah.
the neighbor and dad are like, how would you murder someone in this situation?
And this is so, and I don't know. I when I was married, my ex-husband and I used to watch a lot of true crime stuff, and it was a conversation that we would come back to, like over and over. How could you get away with murder? And his idea was, you pick a stranger, you know, and then from there, all the other kind of logistics of trying not to leave any DNA behind. But even if you did, if there's no connection between you and this stranger, you're much more likely to get away with it. And that's just like so disturbing to me that was like just like a source of entertainment, that he and I would like, get into these deep conversations about that.
Sure, but that's also like, again, like, why do we watch horror movies? Why do we watch
Yeah.
crime stuff? And the Stephen King thing, like, where he's, like, I gotta write these stories, otherwise I'd be doing it, like the feeding the alligators shit. But then, of course, I don't know. I don't know that Brandon and Philip and Rupert have a better outlet. Rupert does, because he's teaching, he has at least an audience, but, you know, Brandon and Philip are just different than Rupert anyway. So I think Rupert is more human and like us, in that he's sort of fascinated with it, but also kind of fascinated with the idea that, people are terrible. Like, how would you kill people at a hotel versus how would you kill people at a restaurant? Like, what do they deserve, type of thing. And that's when, Mr. Kenley is like, I don't like this. Like,
Yeah.
and he just, there's that, I love that scene where he just looks down for like 10 or 15 seconds, and then he pulls his head back up, and it's like, you guys really fucked him. Like, you really
Yeah.
put him, you made this sweet man uncomfortable, And then, of course, the reality of the situation is that, yeah, they did that, but they also killed his son, and his son is in the chest, where Mr. Kenley's whiskey glass is,
I mean, it would just, I mean, I don't know. I don't know where Mr. Kentley is, 2 weeks from the party, when he knows everything,
Right.
but just in that moment where he's like, you might as well kill me too, if that's your deal, that you want to kill inferior people, because I'm inferior, because I can't understand why you're talking about this, and I can't understand if you're joking or not. So I must be inferior. And that is just like layers of that just are just like so heartbreaking.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I didn't think about the idea of looking at him in the future and thinking that he was at this dinner party where his freshly murdered son was rotting in a chest where his first edition books used to live,
It's so gross. So, I mean, maybe we should talk about the ending and the
Yeah.
confrontation that Rupert finally has when he realizes that they have. I love the look on Jimmy Stewart's face when he does open the chest, and we don't see David's body, but he does,
Yeah.
and he is horrified.
Yeah. So just like plot wise, clearing anything up, the party ends, David is not there. Kind of people leave in a sort of hurry because they're concerned. Rupert leaves as well, and then Mrs. Wilson leaves too, right? And then it's just Philip and Brandon, and Philip is very much, still very anxious and nervous, and he's also quite a bit drunk at this point. And Brandon is like, we did it, we got away with it, and then there's a call, and it's Rupert, and he wants to come back. And so he, sends for him to come back. And yeah, and this is when that kind of all happens. And he comes back on sort of the pretense that he left his wallet there, cigarette case there. And he just like needed to grab it, but he goes right over to the chest, and we can see that he's like placing the cigarette case there in order to quote unquote find it in a moment. And when he does, he's like, oh yeah, here it was. And of course, Brandon and Philip, like, they know it wasn't there because that's all they're looking at pretty much the entire night. They know what is on that chest and what isn't on that chest, of course. And he starts to say, well, maybe you did it this way, and it's not the way that they did it necessarily, which I think is why they don't just shoot him, or because Brandon has a gun on him, and I think that's why Brandon doesn't shoot him, because he's not retelling it the right way, so perhaps he doesn't really know.
But that's a kind of interesting shot too, because like as Jimmy Stewart is describing his theory, or Rupert is describing his theory, the camera moves as, as he's telling the story. It moves around the room.
Like where it would have
And
happened.
yeah, here you would have come around the couch this way, and you would have conked him on the head with some statue or something. Anyway, and so the camera is moving exactly the way he is narrating, his theory.
Yeah, which is so cool because then you get how brilliant it is to keep it in this one room because you know every inch of that room by this time in the film, really, so it's all very familiar and it just feels, it's brilliant. I think that shot. Oh God, I'm glad you mentioned that. And then he opens the chest and that sort of recognition, and he goes into that gorgeous monologue that you love. I love it too.
Yeah. I mean, it's just really, really great. I think it's just, I know people think or say that he was miscast in this, but I don't think so. I think the smirk that he has on his face for like the first part of the movie and then the final monologue is just like, you get your money's worth with this performance.
I agree. I go back and forth because I'm the person that's like, who's better for this? Jimmy Stewart here, Jimmy Stewart here, and I'll do that like all the time. But I agree with you after thinking more about it. I agree with you that you do get your money's worth with him on this one, especially in that last monologue. And well, before that happens, though, he fights with Philip to get the gun.
Oh yeah, that's good.
And when he gets the gun, he goes to the window and he just like shoots it a bunch of times to sort of like, call the police, but also I guess to get rid of all the bullets, because then no one can steal it back from him and shoot him, which actually upon first watch this time around, I was like, yeah, I wonder how dangerous that is, just shooting it out into the street a bunch of times.
It's great in terms of like a play or a movie, because after that you just get voices.
Yes, and they don't know what's happening. They're like, did you hear it from over there? No, it came from here. Are you going to call the police? And it's like, it's that, oh God, the sound is so, it's like, it's gorgeous the way that kind of unfolds out there. And again, it's like by this time, you don't feel like there's anyone else in this world because your attention has been so glued because of, just the simplicity of the set that you're like, oh my God, there are other people that exist in this world. This world isn't just Mr. Kentley's and Brandon's. Like there's more gray, and those people are out there. Yeah, I love that. And then they're just like, I like the end shot too, where the silence kind of just falls and Brandon is like pouring a new drink.
Drinking, yeah.
And Philip's by the piano
and then and Rupert has his arm kind of resting on the chest, but he has the gun in his hand also. But it's like his elbows on the chest, like, and his back is to the audience. It's this beautiful tableau. Yeah. And it's like, that's what the police are going to walk into. And I don't know, it's just really brilliant.
Yeah. And I loved the New York New York skyline that you see throughout, that's like changing, and which was a 3D model, and it's like, I guess people very much criticize it for looking very fake. I want to live in that. Like, I love that. I am so drawn to that sort of, I don't know, just like the cityscape that he creates. I loved it. Like I kept looking at it. I was like, my attention was there the whole time.
Yeah, it's really cool, like set design.
Yeah.
It's really a feat, to have a movie take place in one setting and you are interested in that, what's outside that window the whole time.
And I love to look at I love to talk about and like look at and sort of analyze his different shots and cinematography, and it's difficult to do it with this one because of the constraints that he had, but I don't know. I mean, I think that he's still doing some technically very cool things in this very unique experiment for 1948.
Yeah, I mean, I said at the top, maybe it was ill-conceived, but I mean, I'm glad he did it. I was right after I watched this movie, I looked up I think it's a 2.5 or 2:40 minute unbroken shot in The Northman. Um, and I mean, people would have come up with unbroken shots. I mean, whatever. But just to think of, from 48 to 2022, and I don't know the difference. I mean, I think that um, I sent it to Mr. C. I'm just like, have you seen this? Like maybe you might want to watch this movie. And he was like, that shot is bananas. I'm like, I know. It's insane that is like something that exists in the world. It's so incredible.
Oh, you should send that to me too. We watched The Northman for Squad, but I want to see which one you're talking about.
Yeah. And actually I went down a little rabbit hole after that. And, Eggers is a freaking maniac. Like I guess it's the most honest portrayal of Vikings like ever. There was all this stuff that was like really authentic. And I mean, he's just insane with that stuff. So
yeah, that was one I really did not plan on enjoying, even though I was like, but it's Eggers. And then I was like, of course you loved it. Of course
it's so good.
Yeah.
And WOHO's listeners to the main show, we are going to do a Willem Dafoe / Robert Eggers Palooza, where we look at The Northman and The Lighthouse. Maybe one of my all-time favorite movies.
Yeah. Oh, God. So good. So good. So good.
Should we talk about some trivia?
Yeah, let's do it.
There sure is a lot.
Yeah. Oh, I loved the trailer. Did you look up the trailer?
Yes.
Wasn't that neat?
That was cool.
Loved
I wish more movies would do that. That was such an ingenious idea.
I know. It's such it's a trailer should lure you to see the film. It shouldn't be like a summary of the movie, So for all of you all out there who have not looked up Trailer to Rope, you should look it up. It's like a little mini film. I think it's called One Spring Day. But all it is, it's David. It's like the scene right before David goes into Brandon and Philip's apartment. So he's out sitting on a park bench with Janet, and they're kind of talking about like when the best time would be to announce their engagement, and should it be tonight? And it's like cute, and you can see their relationship because throughout the whole movie, Janet and David are together, but you find out that Janet before that was with their friend Kenneth, right? Kenneth. And then before that she was with Brandon. And Brandon is like, oh yeah.
No, I didn't know that.
I think, yeah. Yeah, and then so through the whole film, Brandon is like, well, I think you're going to probably switch over back to Kenneth, and it's like these little, and she suspects as well. I think, at some point, I think it wouldn't be far from her suspecting, at least. Like, she would be the next person to suspect because she thinks of Brandon as like a sort of conniving weasel, which he is.
Yeah.
But so then you do to get to see them like have a tiny conversation that feels organic and realistic. And then it like sort of like fades away, and then you see Jimmy Stewart, and he's like, that's the last time that Janet saw David ever. And that's the last time you're gonna see David ever. And it's great. And then he's like, Alfred Hitchcock's Roper. I don't know if he says that, but he says, that's the last time you'll ever see David alive.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool. All right. So this was Hitchcock's first color film, and it's 1948. So we had some years where he could have been using color. Oh, I think this is cool, and I don't know if it's totally well known. there is a group of Hitchcock movies that were they were unavailable for 3 decades because of the rights, and they were brought back by Hitchcock and left as a part of his legacy to his daughter Patricia Hitchcock, and she okayed them to be re-released. And they're kind of known as the Lost Hitchcocks, and they're like kind of some of the best too. So they were re-released in 1984. So for the previous 3 decades, you could not find them unless you had copies or whatever, which people did. But among these were Rear Window, The Man Who Knew Too Much, the 56 version, The Trouble with Harry, and Vertigo. So this is one of those movies that, kind of garnered a lot of all of these movies garnered critical acclaim after they were re-released, more so than I think when they were initially released. And I would say Rear Window, is probably like his most popular.
Oh yeah, I think it's pretty accessible, and it's about a murder. Maybe it's about a murder, but 84, that fits with that Roger Ebert thing I was talking about before. I would have been a teenager, so it makes perfect sense.
When you were mentioning that, I wonder if it was like the big re-release.
Probably.
This was the only movie Jimmy Stewart made with Hitchcock that he didn't like. Stewart later admitted he felt he was miscast as the professor. And he makes his first appearance 28 minutes into the movie. So the other movies that he's in of Hitchcock's are Rear Window, The Man Who Knew Too Much, and Vertigo. So
I like it that he doesn't show up, for a while. And when he does show up, it's like, oh, hey.
Yeah.
There he is.
Yeah. It's just interesting that all of the Jimmy Stewart Hitchcocks were among the Lost Hitchcocks.
Yeah.
Weird.
Okay, well, you and I have a date to see The Man Who Knew Too Much and The Girl Who Knew Too Much. So,
yeah.
Cue balls, stay in touch. I mean, stay tuned.
Yeah. Filmed January 12th to February 21st. There are 10 shots in the movie overall. 9 minutes and 34 seconds, 7 minutes, 51, 7:18, 7:09, 9:59, 8:35, 7:50, 10:06, 4:37, and 5:40 minutes and seconds each. I thought that was going to tell me how many days that they filmed it. Because I feel like this was a really short film. Like it was a very quick film to make. At least to film. Cary Grant was the first choice to play Rupert.
And I think, I'm not sure if I read this, so I don't think I made it up, but I think James Mason was also maybe in the running, and their names both come up in the movie. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, all right. So James Stewart was paid $300,000, a huge portion of the $1.5 million budget. Wow. Well, I mean, he's good. Montgomery Clift was the first original choice to play Brandon.
He would have been great.
Yeah, but I'm okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with the casting too. It's just that, Montgomery Clift.
Yeah. All right, so this is one of 3 Hitchcocks in which 2 characters plot to commit the perfect murder. One is Strangers on a Train from 1951, the other being Die a Limb for Murder, and that's 54. In Shadow of a Doubt, Joseph Newton and his friend Herbie Hawkins discuss foolproof ways to commit a murder, but neither is serious about carrying it out. And of course, the neighbor, Herbie, is played by Hume Cronin, who also adapted this. So, not
and also
surprised.
Farley Granger was in Strangers on a Train.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oof. Strangers on a Train is one that doesn't age well for me for some reason, but that's just me.
Yeah, I was going to rewatch it before we recorded, but I didn't. But it's a great one. Woho's cue balls. I wonder
You
if all the
wanna?
cue balls are Woho's. I'm pretty sure all the Woho's are cue balls, but I'm not sure.
I hope so. Do you want to go over any other trivia that you especially like, or do you want to move on to Letterboxd?
Let's do Letterboxd. Do you want to do the higher starred reviews?
Oh, sure. All right. This review is by Chris, and it's 4.5 stars. This review may contain spoilers. Imagine being Philip and you just want to have a nice gay vacation in the country with your boyfriend, but he turns out to be a homicidal maniac. I love it. Yeah. I don't know. You do start to feel empathy for Philip here and there, but not quite.
Not yeah, up to a point, but I mean, you know what you were getting into.
Yeah, exactly. Brandon is a fucking maniac. Like, yeah, we all know that. All right. This one is from Clarissa, and she rewatched by Clarissa. Okay. She gives it 5 stars. She just says, Jimmy Stewart jump scare. This next one is Sid, who gives it 5 stars. Says, reverse Knives Out. I like that. That's fun. Jade Moore, who gives it 5 stars, says, this film is as gay as the shots are long. Oh, that's beautifully written. All right. Manolo, who gives it 5 stars, says, I'm rewatching the Hitchcock's movies. What? I'm so in love with this masterpiece. The ambientations have so relaxed me. One of my fave movies of all time. Note, not a word in English, but ambientation means setting in Spanish. Okay.
That was my note, yeah.
All right,
I'm like, that's got to be something. So, yeah.
So it's probably ambientación.
Ambientación.
Yeah, I'm probably not doing a great pronunciation. All right, so Zach Onion Rope. Oh, Zach Onion. I have a hard time with these. I feel like sometimes when I'm reading these, I feel like I'm 96 years old.
Oh, that's fine. Me too.
Okay. He gives it 5 stars and says, this was really good. I don't know if I've ever watched a murder mystery where I wanted one killer to get caught and one killer to get away with it. We didn't mention this, but something that I love about this movie is champagne.
Oh, yeah, champagne.
Like everyone just is like, oh, champagne. Oh, you're having champagne? Oh, it must be such a to-do then. And then, I don't know, I think Brandon says, Janet, what would you say to a glass of champagne? She says, hello, champagne. Because she's so fucking funny.
She's so funny.
Jen gives it 5 stars, rewatched by Jen. Oh my god, I didn't look at these before. Her review is, he said you could have it! And that is a direct line from the film. It's near the end when it's just Jimmy Stewart and Philip and Brandon, and Jimmy Stewart is unraveling the mystery. And he's just about there, and he's asking for a drink, and he's already asked for it like once or twice. And then Brandon says something like, I'll get you a small drink. And he's like, we'll make it maybe a big drink, And then a couple minutes later, after more things are said, he's like, oh yeah, could I have that drink? You really don't mind. I don't want to trouble you. You don't mind if I have that drink. And then out of nowhere, Philip yells, he said you could have it! And when I was watching it this time around, I just about peed my pants.
Lurdoch Film gave it a 0.5 star. So fucking wank. Give me a rope to hang myself.
I'm not even going to comment.
Hep Review gave it a 0.5 star. The rope didn't get enough screen time.
It did get some interesting screen time, though, I feel like.
Yeah, it did. I mean, when you saw the rope, it was always significant.
Yeah, and in the beginning it was sticking out of the fucking chest.
I think tying the books up with the rope was really audacious.
Oh yeah, when you comprehend that he's doing that, it's like next level. It's like fucking Brandon,
Brandon,
man.
he's a psychotic.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
it's I mean, just his face too. Dall's face is such a shit eating grin face that you want to punch. I love
yeah.
him.
Parrot 11 gave it 1.5 stars. The only the only thing that you could say is good about this movie is the cinematography and James Stewart lol. I was more interested in the side story and the side characters than the main story. I found myself bored and looking at my phone throughout. Okay, Parrot 11.
I mean, I agree that the side characters are cool,
They
but
are cool.
nothing
But I
else.
mean that makes sense. That's what you would want in a play. I mean, that's just good writing.
Yeah.
Nicholas Austin gave it a half star. Just talking the whole time.
Aw, Nick.
It is a very talky movie.
It is a very talky movie, yeah. But you do learn a lot, I feel like, too.
Yeah, and I mean the jokes are there too. Brandon is one saucy bitch, and he just, you know, he has the funniest lines, I think.
Yeah, he really is saucy. Oh my god. He's maniacal. Oh god. He should be on a list of like villains. It's surprising we
Yeah,
don't see more of him on lists of the greatest villains and whatnot.
I don't feel like this movie is. I mean, I don't know if we didn't do this podcast, I don't know if I ever would have watched it because I just don't feel like it's highlighted that much, and there really is a lot to love about this movie.
Yeah, I don't know why. I think I incorrectly felt like this was one of his more popular films, but I don't really think. I think that was a Quinn anecdotal thing, like that I sort of imagined. I also, when I remembered it being less dark and you know the implications less severe than they really are. So I'm misremembering some things, but I would love to get Brandon in a room with um Angela Lansbury from The Manchurian Candidate. I want
Oh
to
Lord.
see what they would do to each other. I would pay to see that. I would love that.
I know for some reason I was thinking of Kathy Bates in Misery.
I would love that too.
That would be great too.
I would pay to watch her hobble Brandon. I think we all would.
Oof, yeah.
He needs to be hobbled.
I mean, I really think even up to the last minute, he's just like, can't believe that he's not going to get away with it. It's just like,
I honestly don't believe that he's not going to get away with it. I think
well,
he's with it.
that's another, yeah, I mean, there's another statement there about, the rich and privileged in society and what they can get away with.
Yeah. I also like that bit in the end, the dialogue. I'm very drawn to it when Jimmy Stewart's talking about how they're going to drive up to the cottage tonight and how fun it is to be driving at night. It's like I love that. I love that scene. I don't know. It's just like it makes me so nervous that he's like trying to divert attention in a way because he's like I think he feels like it's going to be hitting very intensely in a second. So he's like trying to divert their attention and be like, I would even like to go with you. I think that would be very adventurous to be driving at night with you too. I don't know. It's weird.
Would you recommend this film, Quinn?
I would. I mean, I want to say I would 100% recommend it, but I wouldn't recommend it to like my mom. even
I was just going to say that. I was just going to say that.
yeah, like she would enjoy. I have like kind of forced her to sit through Hitchcock's, and like she would enjoy this over, and does, I'm sure, or she would enjoy this type of Hitchcock over like Psycho, but no, I don't think this is for my mom. I don't honestly think it's for a lot of people, but
Yeah.
I I did have fun, and I also was affected sort of emotionally by it this time. I would totally recommend it, but I would be just careful who I recommend it to.
I think that this probably shouldn't be your first Hitchcock.
I think that's so true.
But if you have seen, Rear Window and Vertigo and Psycho and you like Hitchcock, yeah. I mean, but yeah, I think, it is very talky. That is true. I
It's
don't
very
I don't
short.
mind a talky film as long as the dialogue is good and moves the story, which this one definitely does.
Yeah, I think the dialogue is so unique too. So when it's not moving the story, it's at least like you're like, in, like it's very unique dialogue. It's just beautiful writing, and the acting across the board phenomenal. So yeah, I would absolutely recommend it.
Yeah, really good. I think it is also interesting that some of the ideas, the sort of Nietzschean ideas that were adopted by Hitler, um, were in this play before World War II. So I just,
Yeah, because it was
yeah.
29, right?
So I just think that's really weird. I mean, it obviously has a bigger impact in 48, but I mean, I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah, that's fascinating. I didn't think about that. Yeah, that is really neat. And then, in this version, of course, too, Mr. Henley brings it up.
yeah,
Like asks straight up, do you subscribe to the theory of the Superman? And he was like, yeah. And he's like, so did Hitler.
right.
And he's like,
Which
very
is a great argument. I mean, just because somebody subscribes to, somebody else's ideas doesn't make those ideas bad.
right.
And I do think Nietzsche's ideas were profoundly misunderstood. I'm not a Nietzschean scholar, so I can't talk that much about it, but he does make the point, that it's a dangerous, just at an existential level, it's dangerous when you start making these distinctions between the inferior man and the superior man.
Yeah.
That's just really, I people might disagree with me, but I just find that to be a very dangerous road to go down.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you that just because one of the most disgusting humans ever subscribed to it doesn't mean that it is what it is, but that is dangerous, such a slippery slope. And I am no scholar on Nietzsche either, but and we didn't even really cover it much here, but I mean, we did cover the implications of it because it is something that Brandon, and Rupert talk about throughout. And of course, it's what kind of stops Mr. Kentley and disturbs him greatly.
Yeah. Which makes me love him so much, because he's just a humble man, and just the kind of person who would be a target for someone who considered themselves to be superior, which is why it gets me in the heart. But
I know, yeah, like it would never be Mrs. Atwater. It would be Mr. Huntley. But I'm glad of that too. I love me some Mrs. Atwater.
Oh, she's a delight.
She is a delight. I would like her to go through my zodiac map chart. I would love that.
That was kind of funny. And in the trivia, we didn't talk about it, but apparently all of her zodiacal statements were correct.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't. What else? Oh, there's something I love that she says that makes me so happy. I don't know. I'll get back to you it won't be on the pod, but I'll message you what I think about it. It's just
Okay.
so cute. I don't know. I just love her though. And I love Janet too. Again, and Janet, I think, when they are talking about these theories is like, oh, those boys, and I don't think she's been around them so much that it doesn't, make her bat an eye. I'll have to fact check that about Brandon and her, but I believe the implication was that Brandon and she were a couple before her and Kenneth.
Oh, that's weird. But what are you going to do? It was 1948.
Yeah.
Or 29, depending on.
Right.
Right. Well, this has been a lovely chat, Quinn. I'm glad we got to talk about rope today.
Yeah, I am too. I'm glad that you're feeling better. This was fun. It was fun to rewatch it, and it was fun that I had such different feelings than I did before, and I don't know. It was a great watch.
I agree. Thank you, Wohos and Cue Balls, for joining us for this special edition Quinnisode. Next time on the main show, Mac and I will be looking at Animals Run Amok movies. We will be reviewing The Birds from the US and Black Sheep from New Zealand, which I watched today, and Wohos and Cue Balls is surprisingly gross. We would love it if you subscribed and left us a nifty 5-star rating, but we'd be just as happy if you just told all your friends about us. We love you, and don't go into the basement.
Yay!
Yay! We did it.